Diane Abbott has already spoken out, warning that the safeguards are collapsing. Tory MP Ben Spencer, a psychiatrist, has raised serious fears about vulnerable people being subtly coerced into choosing death. Even former Supreme Court President Baroness Hale has stepped in, warning against removing judicial oversight. But Labour isn't listening. Why? Because this bill isn't about careful, considered change. It's about forcing a radical agenda through Parliament before the public can stop it. And the reason this bill is even being debated? A promise made to celebrity Esther Rantzen. Yes, one of Britain's most controversial legal changes is happening because the Prime Minister gave a personal guarantee to a celebrity. Rantzen, who has terminal cancer, has said people shouldn't have to travel to Switzerland to end their lives. But here's the catch. She is now on a wonder drug that has extended her life significantly. Her case alone proves the flawed logic of this bill. If even doctors can get predictions about terminal illness wrong, how many people will choose assisted dying only to realise too late that they had more time than they thought? And who will this bill affect the most? The vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled. We've already seen cases abroad where assisted dying laws have spiralled out of control. In Canada, patients with disabilities have been encouraged to consider euthanasia due to financial struggles. Is this the kind of future Britain wants? And make no mistake, this is not just about choice. This is about Labour rushing through dangerous legislation without proper safeguards, silencing critics and hoping no one notices. But people are noticing. The British public is waking up to Labour's lies, their elitism, their reckless spending and their dangerous policies. The cracks are growing, the scandals are piling up, and Labour's time is running out. Despite these deportations, illegal crossings have surged. Thousands more migrants are arriving on boats every single month. Labour's response? Throw money at the problem. Instead of fixing the broken immigration system, tightening border security, or even considering military deportations like the US, Starmer's government is splurging on private jets. The £1 million flight to Albania is a symbol of everything wrong with Labour's approach. £22,000 per deportee, a price tag that exposes the sheer incompetence at play. And yet, this isn't a one-off mistake. This is Labour's new normal, and it gets worse. While Starmer plays tough in front of the cameras, behind closed doors, Labour elites are laughing at the public. The WhatsApp scandal is proof that Labour MPs and councillors don't respect the people who voted for them. 11 suspensions, a sacked minister, and even a police-recorded non-crime hate incident. And yet Labour is hoping the public forgets about it. A health minister caught making anti-Semitic jokes. An MP openly hoping a pensioner dies before the next election. Labour members talking about voters with pure contempt. If this is how they speak behind closed doors, how can they be trusted to govern? It's the same old pattern. Labour pretends to be for the people, while they secretly despise the very people they rely on for votes. They smile on camera, shake hands, make promises, and then laugh at you the second the doors close. And yet, somehow, that's not even the biggest scandal unfolding right now, because as Labour collapses under the weight of its own corruption, they're also quietly pushing through one of the most dangerous laws Britain has ever seen, the Assisted Dying Bill. The public was promised strict safeguards. We were told that 2 doctors and a High Court judge would oversee every case to prevent abuse. And yet, Labour is now scrapping those protections. Instead of a High Court judge, cases will now be reviewed by an expert panel. But let's be clear, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Who will sit on these panels? A legal expert, a psychiatrist, a social worker. And what happens when this panel becomes nothing more than a rubber stamp committee, approving deaths without real scrutiny? The concerns aren't just theoretical. Labour has rigged the review process. Key opponents of the bill have been shut out of the debate. Labour MP Kim Leadbeater has handpicked a committee filled with supporters while silencing those who have genuine concerns. This is the scandal they don't want you to know about. While ordinary Britons struggle with the cost of living crisis, while pensioners are forced to choose between heating and eating, and while our NHS is stretched to its limits, Sir Keir Starmer has just forked out a mind-boggling £1 million of taxpayer money on a private jet to deport just 47 illegal migrants to Albania. That's right. At a time when public services are on their knees, each deportee on that flight cost over £22,000 to remove from the country. That's more than many British workers earn in an entire year. Gone in a matter of hours. The Home Office made sure to release carefully curated footage of the deportation, showing individuals being led up the steps by security escorts, each surrounded by 4 officers. The message from Labour? Look, we're taking action. But the reality? This was nothing more than an expensive PR stunt, a desperate attempt to salvage Labour's crumbling credibility on immigration. The truth is, Starmer's government isn't getting tough on illegal migration. They're just wasting your money while failing to address the core issue. Compare this to the United States. The US deports illegal migrants migrants, using military aircraft, cutting costs, and ensuring swift removals. Meanwhile, in Britain, commercial airlines outright refused to take part in deportation flights, leaving the government with no choice but to book expensive private charter jets. The result, an astronomical price tag, paid for by the hard-working British public. Also, Labour can play pretend. And yet, despite these supposedly tough measures, the numbers tell a different story. Starmer's government has boasted about removing 19,000 foreign nationals since taking office. But let's not forget that under Labour's watch, the number of illegal crossings into Britain has skyrocketed. More and more migrants are arriving on boats every single day. So, what exactly has Labour achieved? Instead of dealing with the crisis at the source, they've opted for an extravagant, inefficient and unsustainable approach, and they expect you to foot the bill. This is just the latest in a long list of betrayals from a party that promised change but has instead delivered chaos. And if you thought this was the worst of it, think again, because Labour is now engulfed in one of the most disgusting political scandals in recent history. As Starmer throws your money away on pointless deportation PR stunts, his party is falling apart over a shocking WhatsApp scandal. What has now come to light is truly sickening. Private messages between Labour officials filled with vile comments about voters, racism, and an open contempt for the very people they're supposed to represent. Former Reform Deputy Leader Ben Habib didn't hold back when speaking on GB News. He called out the total disconnect between those in power and the British public, exposing the way Labour elites look down on ordinary people. And now, the masks are off. 11 Labour councillors have already been suspended, including figures from Tameside and Stockport Council. Health Minister Andrew Gwynn has been sacked over his involvement in the messages, while Burnley MP Oliver Ryan has had the Labour whip removed. And yet, this is only the beginning. What exactly was said in these messages? The details are as horrifying as they are revealing. A senior Labour MP joked about hoping a pensioner constituent would die before the next election. That's right, the very people Labour expects to vote for them are in private, mocked, ridiculed, and treated with absolute disdain. These weren't just banter or offhand remarks. These messages exposed the truth, the real opinions of the Labour elite when they think no one is watching. And let's not forget the anti-Semitic comments. The messages were so vile that Greater Manchester Police have even recorded them as a non-crime hate incident. But here's the catch. If a regular British citizen had been caught making these comments, they'd likely be investigated, possibly even arrested. But when it's Labour, a slap on the wrist, a few suspensions, business as usual. The hypocrisy is staggering. This is the same party that constantly lectures the public about morality, about tolerance, about standing against discrimination. Yet, behind closed doors, they engage in the very behaviour they claim to oppose. What else are they hiding? And if you think Labour couldn't sink any lower, they're also pushing forward one of the most dangerous and controversial bills in modern British history, the Assisted Dying Bill. When MPs voted for this legislation last November, they were promised the strictest safeguards in the world. The bill was meant to give terminally ill adults the option to end their own lives, but only under the strict oversight of 2 doctors and a High Court judge. That was the deal. That was the assurance given to Parliament and the public. But now, in a move that reeks of backroom deals and deception, Labour is quietly removing those protections. The requirement for a High Court judge? Scrapped. Instead, decisions will now be made by an expert panel, which sounds reassuring until you realise that this panel will consist of a legal expert, a psychiatrist, and a social worker. Suddenly, the strictest safeguards in the world look a lot more like a rubber stamp approval process. And here's the real scandal. This entire process is being rigged. Labour MP Kim Leadbeater, who brought forward the bill, has stacked the review committee with supporters while deliberately excluding those who have the strongest objections. Critics have been silenced, and key voices, including psychiatrists who fear the vulnerable could be coerced into choosing death, have been shut out of the conversation. Diane Abbott has sounded the alarm, warning that safeguards are collapsing, while Reform MP Lee Anderson has now withdrawn his support for the bill, calling it a disaster waiting to happen. Even Baroness Hale, the former president of the Supreme Court, has warned against removing judges from the process. But Labour, they're pressing ahead, ignoring every warning sign. And let's not forget how this bill even came to be. It was fast-tracked through Parliament after a promise was made to celebrity Esther Rantzen, a move that bypassed the normal scrutiny and debate that such a monumental societal change should require. Rantzen, who has terminal cancer, has said she doesn't want to go to Switzerland's Dignitas clinic to end her life. But here's the twist. Rantzen is now on a wonder drug that has extended her life considerably. So, what does that say about this bill? If Rantzen herself is living proof that terminal illness predictions can be wrong, how many people might choose assisted dying before realising they had more time? And how many vulnerable Britons could be pressured into making a decision they can never take back? This isn't about personal personal choice. This is about a slippery slope that could put society's most vulnerable at risk. It's about Labour's reckless, deceitful push to force through radical laws without proper debate or scrutiny. And most of all, it's about power, because the more power Labour has, the less they care about the consequences. Between the £1 million private jet deportation disaster, the vile WhatsApp scandal, and the assisted dying bill stitch-up, one thing is clear: Labour is not working for the British people. So the question is, how much longer will the public tolerate this? How much longer will hard-working Britons watch their money being thrown away, their voices being ignored, and their lives being played with by an out-of-touch, elitist government? It's time to wake up. It's time to demand accountability, because if we don't, who knows what Labour will get away with next? Keir Starmer's government is falling apart, and the public is watching in horror. The cracks in Labour's carefully crafted facade are growing wider by the day, from reckless spending on a £1 million deportation flight, to disgusting private messages leaked in a WhatsApp scandal, to the dangerous push for an assisted dying bill that could put lives at risk. The reality of Starmer's leadership is one scandal after another, and the worst part? This is just the beginning. Labour is desperately trying to present itself as a party of change, a fresh alternative after years of Tory rule. But what have they actually delivered? Since taking office, the Labour government has been plagued by controversy, internal chaos, and outright betrayal of the British public. Let's start with the immigration fiasco. Starmer and Home Secretary Yvette Cooper are trying to convince the public that they're tough on illegal migration. They're releasing footage of deportation flights, proudly boasting about the 19,000 people removed since Labour took power. But look deeper, and the truth is a complete failure of leadership.